Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. If you bear with me for 1 second, I will share a slide on my screen and then we will get started. All right, so hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the 5th session out of 6 webinars to present to you a number of thematic agenda items scheduled for discussion at the upcoming 28th session of the CBD's subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice, or SBSTA as you know it. I guess the slides aren't working very well. There you go. All right, so these sessions we're at the 5th out of 6 sessions, as I mentioned. We had a session on marine and coastal biodiversity on Monday, a session on IBES on Tuesday, presenting the business and biodiversity assessment, a session on synthetic biology on Wednesday. Yesterday was the session on planning, monitoring, reporting, and review, and today is our session on the program of work on protected areas. Monday will be our last session on sustainable wildlife management. So these sessions are provided to you by the Co-op for CBD project, which aims to facilitate technical and scientific cooperation for decisions under the CBD to be informed by the best available knowledge and advice towards the achievement of the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. As I mentioned, today's session will focus on the program of work on protected areas presented by Arina Maris and Brent Mitchell. Arina is the head of the Division for Protected Areas at the Ministry of Ecology, Sustainable Development, and Northern Region Development of Montenegro. She is directly involved in the process of establishing new protected areas, terrestrial and marine, and the ecological network Natura 2000, as well as in other activities related to the development of an effective nature protection system in Montenegro. Prior to joining the ministry, she worked at the Public Enterprise for National Parks of Montenegro, giving her 14 years of experience in the field of nature conservation. Arina holds a degree in ecology and an MSc in environment and development. She is a recipient of the Rosotrudnicevo, and Chevening scholarships. Brent serves as Vice Chair of IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas through the NGO Rewild. Under the theme of Scaling Natural Solutions, Brent manages WCPA's response to the 30 by 30 Biodiversity Challenge on behalf of IUCN, the largest conservation alliance in the world. Brent began his career living in the Caribbean and Latin America, contributing to the development of the first national parks in Haiti and the Turks and Caicos Islands, and conducting field research in wildlife ecology in the Dominican Republic and Venezuela. After working at the nexus of nature conservation and civil society in Central and Eastern Europe in the early 1990s and later in the Balkans, his career took him to other regions of the world. Particularly interested in governance and conservation and environmental issues, he led WCPA's specialist group on privately protected areas and nature stewardship for its first 14 years. Arina and Brent will be presenting the agenda item on the program of work of protected areas, for which the CBD Secretariat has published document CBD/SBSTA-28/6/Rev1. And before I hand it over to Arina and Brent, I'll just go over a few ground rules for this session. So the thematic presentations will last 30 minutes, followed by a 30-minute Q&A. Please keep your microphones shut when you're not speaking, and please raise your hand to ask a question to the speakers. Introduce yourself when you speak for the first time. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Co-op for CBD website, along with the PowerPoint presentations that will be shown today. Finally, if you would like to join our Co-op for CBD expert database and participate in some of the project's activities, you have a QR code here that you may scan, which will take you directly to a registration form. And I will wait just a few seconds for you to scan it if you're interested. And then I will hand it over to Arina and Brent.
I hope now everything looks fine. Thank you, Camille, for this introduction, and thank to all participants that joined to this online session. So as you heard, I work in the Ministry of Ecology in Montenegro, and I had the opportunity to be at 2 SBSTTA meetings. As you know, this is a scientific and technology advisory body with the main aim to prepare recommendations. And if you will be a part of delegation of your state, then you can really contribute to the improvement of the document. So I hope that this presentation will help you in the preparation for the meeting. So, of course, we have to start from the Convention on Biological Diversity, where protected areas are defined, but also some of the main obligations to parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So there is an obligation to establish a system of protected areas, but not only, also the areas where special measures need to be taken to conserve biological diversity, also to develop guidelines for the selection, establishment, and management of protected areas or other areas, but also I have highlighted here one of the obligation that is now maybe in the most of the focus is to involvement of indigenous people and local communities in the conservation of nature. So the preparation process of the program of work on protected areas has started in 1998 because in that moment protected areas were defined as one of the 3 main themes for its 7th meeting. So it was decided that the ad hoc technical expert group on protected areas will be established and that collaboration will be encouraged with the 5th World Parks Congress and all to have this analysis and preparation about protected areas and next steps. At COP6 in 2002, it was adopted a strategic plan for the Convention on Biological Diversity. And why it is important? Because the program of work, besides of NBSUP and other national, regional, and international activities, were identified as the tools for the implementation of this strategic plan. In 2004, at COP7, this program of work on protected areas was adopted. And that meant that protected areas were recognized to have a central role of protected areas in the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. The overall objective of the program of work on protected areas was to establish and maintain comprehensive, effectively managed and ecologically representative system of protected areas by 2010 for terrestrial and 2012 for marine areas. Of course, its goal was to reduce the rate of global loss of global biodiversity. However, it was also noted that protected areas have more they are actually tools for also combat climate change than to secure vital ecosystem services, but also to help the implementation of Millennium Development Goals at that time and Sustainable Development Goals afterwards. Program of work on protected areas have 4 interlinked elements. The first one concerns direct actions for planning, selecting, establishing, straightening, and managing protected area systems and sites. But not only, it also have this focus on the strengthening cooperation between countries to establish transboundary areas. The second element, it's about governance, participation, equity, and benefit sharing, where we can also find the need for promotion of benefit for indigenous people and local communities. The third element, enabling activities, is actually about actions to enable implementation of the elements and activities from the first and the second element. The fourth is about standards and assessment and monitoring, which means that assessment and monitoring of the activities from the previous elements, which in the end is effective management of protected areas. So there are 92 activities, 16 goals for each, not for each element, sorry, in total, but element has its specific goal, outcome-oriented target, and related activities. But there are no for everyone indicators, which is, we know, very important nowadays. The program of work, what is important for the representatives of parties to understand, was intended to assist in establishing national program of works with targeted goals, actions, specific actors, time frame, inputs, and expected measurable outputs. So this slide actually shows one of the most important documents adopted at COPs. So the first one I already mentioned, Strategic Plan for the Convention on Biological Diversity. And the program of work was a mean to implement this strategic plan. The second strategic plan that was adopted in 2010 translated core elements of the program of work into measurable global commitments. And I'm sure that everybody who is here on this online session know about Target 11. And the third document is Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Although it is not named strategic plan, it is the main framework that we are implementing nowadays. And of course, Target 3, that not only translated core elements of the program, but this is something that we need to talk later about, but it also added other effective area-based conservation measures as a category of the conservation, and it recognized indigenous and traditional territories where it is applicable. Just a short reflection on how a program of work on protected areas is implemented or was implemented in Montenegro. Definitely, as for the majority of countries, we didn't have independent program of work, but we integrated it in the MB-subs. The first one we adopted in 2010 and the last one recently in 2026. But that not only in these documents we have integrated program, but also in law on nature protection, law on national parks. We don't have established transboundary protected areas, but we do have signed several memorandum of understandings that are helping to reach that goal, to have established transboundary area. Recently, we are working actively on inclusive preparation of management plans. And again, recently we have adopted several guidelines for preparation of management plans, also annual management programs that have a clear plan how to integrate climate change mitigation actions, then to better prepare a finance plan, but also to assess management effectiveness and to organize data management. And now the most important for you is our comments on strategic review of an update to the program of work on protected areas. On the right side, it's a content of this document that is going to be discussed at SBSTTA meeting, but I will focus on the summary of the strategic review and the recommendations. So why we had review? Because program of work on protected areas was not formally updated since its adoption, which was in 2004. Therefore, at COP15 and COP16, it was requested from the Secretariat to conduct a strategic review and analysis of all programs in the context of the GBF and to prepare draft updates. This review was, several parties and observer governments, indigenous people, local communities, and relevant organizations were involved in the preparation of this review. This is a slide about the main findings of this review, and I think it will help you to understand the recommendations that came afterwards and eventually the update of the program. So of course, these findings are short version of the original findings in the document, so please refer to the original document while you will be preparing for the meeting. So the first conclusion was that the program of work remains highly relevant, and I can agree with that because it really shows the overlap of all important elements that are needed for the system of protection of our nature. Then the conclusion was that it is better to conduct an update than full revision, although some parties expressed that it will be better to have this full revision. Program of work needs to strengthen guidance in support of Target 3 and to include OACMs and indigenous traditional territories alongside protected areas. The program of work provides substantial guidance for targets 1, 13, 19, 20, and 22. But again, there is a room for the improvement. That the program partially or indirect have guidance for targets 2, 7, 9, 11, 14, 15, 21, and 23, and has limited or no explicit guidance for targets 8, 10, 12, and 16, which is about climate change, sustainable use in production sectors, urban biodiversity, etc. For instance, it says that it will be necessary to include climate change activities or activities to combat climate change in the management programs. Then the conclusion that there is a need for greater integration of protected and conserved areas within wider socio-ecological systems, to update the title into protected and conserved areas. And there were also identified overarching gaps. So the outdated terminology, concept, approach, there is a limited alignment with the monitoring framework for the framework. There is a need for further incorporation, a human rights-based approach, including equitable governance. There are gaps in addressing gender responsiveness and the inclusion of youth and persons with disabilities. And here are the recommendations. And here you can actually intervene. And I will read it again. This is a short version, so please refer to the original document. They are acknowledging that a program of work remains strategic framework for GBF, especially Target 3, but additional guidance is needed to improve alignment and address existing gaps. Decides to revise the name of the program of work into protected and conserved areas in order to reflect a broader concept. It endorses the complementary activities for further or improved guidance contained in the annex. Annex is this updated program. Invites parties and other governments to take into account the updated program of work. This is why this updated program of work is particularly important, because we will need to implement it. Invites governments, organizations, indigenous people, local communities, and other stakeholders to support implementation. Encourages parties to apply conservation approaches that respect human rights, recognize diverse governance system, and ensure the meaningful participation of rights holders. And this recommendation refers to Executive Secretary. I will not go into details, just to mention that this recommendation is about strengthening collaboration, enhancing scientific and technical support for parties, and to have this report on progress that should be made before the COP18. And the update to the program of work, it's actually a table that shows the mapping of the targets of the GBF against complementary activities that could support the implementation of the program of work and on protected and conserved areas. So this is already a new title for the program. So these activities are organized in 3 categories. The one that are called priority actions for Target 3. the second one that are complementary, and the third one that need additional guidance. So I know that I have a little time left, so I will just show you how it looked like. So, and ask you to pay attention on these activities, since they represent the update of the program of work. Of course, for the target 3, we have the most of activities. And the last slide from my side, I mentioned that topic of including indigenous people and traditional territories are one of the main topics. At COP16, parties adopted a new program of work on Article 8, which you may remember from the first slide. And as you know, we have protected areas which have conservation as an objective. We have OACMs, where conservation is an outcome. We have a term indigenous and community conserved areas that are actually territories governed by the indigenous people and local communities. And we have this new term, indigenous and traditional territories, with a right-based territorial system, which means that traditional people can, I'm sorry, I didn't name it right. So the people who are occupying the territory, and they are living there in the traditional way that contributes to the protection of that area. So this is the short explanation of this context. And this is one of the topics that could be discussed at SBSTTA meeting in detail. So it would be good for you to think about from your perspective, from perspective of your country. For instance, in Montenegro, we do not have indigenous people. We do not have traditional territories. We do have local communities that occupy territory because they are private owners of that land, but not very much in the context of the conservation of nature. So I hope that this presentation helped you a little bit to understand the concept. And of course, I am here for all your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arina, and I'll hand it over to Brent for the rest of the presentation before we open the Q&A part of this session, if that's all right.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Can you see my first slide?
Yes, okay. Perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to be reinforcing some of the things that Arina said in her good presentation and emphasizing a couple of points. But I always like to start by reminding myself and others that why conservation areas are important. We always got to remember that it's about nature. This is the Taper Valley tree frog. This little guy, the only known range, the entire known range for this is an 8-hectare wetland in northern Costa Rica. So if anything were to happen to this little marsh, this species would go extinct. I'm happy to report that it is well protected in this case. So yeah, we're talking about the program of work on protected areas. It's really rather amazing that it hasn't been updated in over 2 decades. So it was really overdue to have a look at it. And this is just a graphical summary of the structure of it that Arina described, and 16 goals and associated targets, 92 recommended actions. It was interesting to look through it, give it attention anew for this review process. And there's a lot that's in there, a lot that's yet to be achieved at any scale. So we were very excited to see that that it would be reviewed. However, we had anticipated that there would actually be a revision of it, and we actually went through line by line and suggested potential revisions for consideration by the parties. we're still hopeful. I mean, there's a lot that's in there, but there's a lot that's out of date. So that was our contribution to the process, and certainly understand the instruction that was given to the Secretariat to have a consistent review process for all of the programs of work. And the PALPA, if you will, is patterned on the review process that was used for the program of work on forest biodiversity. But they're really very different documents. Unlike the PALPA, which is very closely associated with a single target, with target 3, forest biodiversity it does really need to be represented across all of the targets of the global biodiversity framework. So it's a little different case in the case of the PALPA. And you may not have seen this yet, but this is an INF doc that dropped just this week. So in addition to well, they're all official, but the document that Arina was talking about, you may want to look at this. It's a much longer document. It has more information about the input that was received and summarizes a lot of good information. So I recommend that to you. And it actually suggests that a revision might still be possible. At least it uses that word, whether the intent was there or not. And we're still hopeful that we might see a full revision because it does, in the conclusion, it talks about how obviously the PALPA is going to focus largely on target 3 as a primary consideration, in addition to all the priorities that the parties expressed through the review process and elsewhere. And Arina, screened this list, but I would just pull out a couple. It's no surprise that the first one is about explicitly address OECMs and ITTs. Both are relatively new terms. OECMs is now defined, but it hasn't been for long. We do have guidance on OECMs, voluntary guidance, but there's still a lot of questions and not concerns, but a lot of things that are not quite clear to a lot of people, quite understandably. And again, ITTs is a term that was created just in 2022. So there's very little we know yet about what that is about. Program of work still has timelines of 2006 and 2008, 2010. Obviously need to bring those up. A lot on human rights-based approaches. A lot on technical work of ecological integrity, resilience, connectivity, things that weren't really at the fore in the same detail that we now have technical expertise on, and legal recognition of ITTs consistent with Article 8J, which I presume you're all familiar with, and a lot on case studies and things. We continue to try to have better monitoring and evaluation. That is something that is still needs work. I would mention strengthening capacity building, especially professionalization of the workforce, rangers and the like. So it's a pretty good list of things. But the key to the PALPA is its implementation, how it's used, how it informs action at the national level, and certainly we're concerned about how folks at the implementation stage will be able to use two very, very different documents, being that structure of the PALPA, which doesn't go away in the current decision, plus the update that's currently presented. So we would certainly encourage thinking about or discussing whether we might take that information and really put it into a revision that would be much more easily acceptable for folks. Another point that I want to talk about is, you know, the only time decision is used in the recommendation is this changing of the name of program of work on protected areas, protected and conserved areas, and this is certainly welcome. You know, we need to recognize the broader diversity of approaches to conservation areas, but there are also problems with it. In using that umbrella term, you know, we in a formal context like the CBD, you know, protected areas are defined right in the convention. OECMs were defined in Decision 14.8. Indigenous and traditional territories are not yet defined, and in fact, there is some resistance to actually having a definition at all. There's no clarity that OECMs is directly equivalent to conservation areas. When we say conserved areas, when we say conserved areas, do we mean OECMs? Do we mean OECMs and ITTs? Do we mean something else? It's just not clear. And let's see, where's my next slide? You know, again, we have a definition on OECMs, but still questions. On indigenous and traditional territories, any mechanism for recognition by whom and how is far from settled. Very new term, and all of that needs to go through the 8J process, and that's going to take some time. You know, we don't expect that there's going to be much clarity by the time the COP convenes in October. And back at the last substo, there were, you know, the beginnings of conservation criteria that were floated, but we left with that still very much in brackets. So again, not much clarity. And there are many who have a position that indigenous and traditional territories, a very sui generis position, that they are so different that we can't really talk about them with the same concepts that we do protected areas and OECMs. So that's a long way to getting to the point that we could be looking a couple of years down the road to having to change the name again to something like Program of Work on Protected and Conserved Areas and Indigenous and Traditional Territories, which Program of Work on Protected and Conserved Areas is already a mouthful. In the review process, we proposed for consideration a different umbrella term, a more inclusive term of conservation areas that really can encompass all the diversity of approaches that we embrace today. And important to me, it dispels the notion that OECMs and ITTs and even protected areas are fully conserved. You know, conservation is an ongoing struggle. It's something that we will always have to work with. When an area is gazetted or recognized as an OECM, the job is not done, it's only beginning. So the term conservation area implies a place where there's living action for conservation going on. It also avoids the negative connotation that some have for protected areas. And it shifts the focus from really outcomes in conservation areas rather than intent with particularly protected areas, but also OECMs. The term area-based conservation has been used and used in the CBD discussions, as most recently as Panama. Problem is that can also include things like short-term single species fisheries closures, things that are not, they're area-based and they're conservation, but they're not really aligned with the intent of Target 3 at least. And it also translates, conservation areas translates better, at least least into French and Spanish. So we put that to your consideration as you deliberate in Nairobi and later in Yerevan. However it comes out with the update or revision, the Commission continues to be committed to making the program of work as successful as possible. We're named in a few places, but of course, as you could see in the covers of some of the technical guidance, we develop a lot of that and we'll continue to. So in the last couple of minutes, while I have the floor, just two other closing comments. Some of you may be old enough to remember that the 2004 program of work on protected areas was heavily informed by the 5th World Parks Congress in South Africa. And that the Durban Accord and the message to the CBD that came out of that big meeting was really taken up when the program of work was originally developed at COP7. And now, 24 years after the 5th Congress, we're now planning just the 7th Congress for September in 2027. And that also the program is being developed to really be able to inform and offer technical perspectives to whatever happens with conservation areas going forward after 2030. And as you can see in here, we also struggle with the terminology protected and conserved area. But as recently as Monday, our host in Panama, the environment minister in Panama, complained about the length of the title and doesn't care for the term, which kind of supports our idea of maybe we could have a better term. And finally, because I know that a lot of parties have asked for guidance on sustainable use as it's used in Target 3. What are the limits of sustainable use? What is consistent? What isn't? And just to let you know that we have a task force right now that's looking at how we can take that somewhat subjective statement and perhaps tease out some objective criteria for your consideration. We have a workshop in a couple of weeks. We hope to have a side event in Nairobi to give sort of the preliminary findings on that. Again, not entirely related, but I know that's something that folks are looking for. So with that, I will finish my talking. And again, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you to you both actually for your in-depth analysis of the for the document for the program of work on protected areas. It's, I'm hoping, very helpful for people. I also want to flag that I linked in the chat a technical brief that the project, the Co-op for CBD project, obviously has produced on Indigenous and traditional territories and ICCAs, but also looking at other tools just to kind of understand the landscape and the discussions around these topics. So I hope that will be of use for all of you. And now I wonder if there are any questions for our speakers today. Feel free to also ask questions in the chat if you prefer doing that. I can also read them out loud for everyone, but again, don't be shy.
Camille, there is one question in the chat already, just before your posting on.
Yes, that's correct. You're right. My answer was to that question on explaining how ITTs differ from ICCAs, but please go ahead. The technical brief I mentioned also addresses this, hence my message, but it might be interesting for you, either one of you or both of you, to address that question here as well.
Well, I would say it's not entirely clear. The the term indigenous and community conserved areas is something that has been used. There's a very active consortium related to that. They're talking about the same sort of places. It's just that when the negotiations were underway for the Global Biodiversity Framework, the term of indigenous and traditional territories was chosen as for the term. There's a lot of overlap. In terms of the CBD process, the term under discussion is ITT rather than ICCA. That's what's in the language of Target 3.
And the same term is also being discussed under the new subsidiary body on Article 8J within the CBD, which met for the first time in October in Panama, and the discussions will continue at COP17 in Armenia, obviously. Any other questions?
And by the way, I might add, Camille, there are many advocates. Some of them prefer the term of territories of life.
Yes, that's correct.
But there's a great deal, if not entire, overlap with the sorts of areas that are meant by these terms.
Thank you. Any other questions for our speakers today?
Were we really that clear?
Crystal clear today. Crystal clear.
Or everything clear or nothing is clear.
Maybe it's one or the other. I don't know. Yes, so to answer the question in the chat, the presentations will be posted on the Co-op for CBD website on the library page, I believe. And so will the recording from today's session, but also from all other sessions that were held this week. Everything will be posted early next week once our last session on sustainable wildlife management will be done. If there are no further questions, I'm also happy to close the session early, but I also want to give people maybe a last opportunity to raise their hand and ask a question before I do that.
Camille, I just want to say that if someone wants to reach us individually, please do. You will see my email on the last slide of the presentation, and if you have any comments or maybe you want to share some thoughts, have some questions, because a lot of questions is about protected areas and management of protected areas. So please do that.
Thank you for that. That's very much appreciated. So I guess maybe, oh, I see Fiona posted the link to the training corner, and that's correct. That's where all the materials will be posted, not on the library. The technical briefs that we have produced for SBSTTA-28 are on the library page, though, which I posted earlier in the chat. And I guess with this, if there are no other questions, then maybe I will close this session. And I also want to thank both our speakers once more for your presentations. It was great to have you here and go into these documents in depth. I hope it will help people get ready for Nairobi. And I will maybe see some of you at the next session and final session on Monday on sustainable wildlife management. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day and take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Hope to see many of you in Nairobi.